All right, welcome everybody to Cycle Jerks Podcast. Your host, Mike Stewart, and I'm here as always with Dave Dalton, who's joining us from Cape Cod today. Dave, how you doing?
I'm great. I'm great. Sand between my toes, and then maybe I've had a margarita. But okay, let's just go on. So,
All right. Well, I won't hold
because
that
I know
against
how
you.
you feel about that. So,
But hey, today's a big day. We're very excited to be joined by someone who's a returning guest. He's on the podcast long ago. He's done a lot of amazing stuff on bikes. And anyway, but without further ado, Derek Teel from Dialed Health. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, guys. It's great to come
whoop,
back.
whoop.
Genuinely looking forward to just chatting it up.
Yeah,
Great.
right on. Well, as I mentioned in the intro there, I mean, you've obviously done some stuff that's mind-boggling. The double Everest, is the one that it really jumps out to me because I've done an Everest, but also the off-road Everest, another wild one, and then the Everest Rome. And yeah, so last time you were on, we talked about those things, but something very significant happened to you, and yeah, it's just been uh, it was hard to see it, but to see the community rally around it, it was really something. It was really beautiful to see because you've given so much to this area and to just social media in general. Like anybody that's into fitness, I mean, you put so much content out there for everybody to consume for no charge. And just yeah, if you could just take us back to that day when that crash took place and how it all came to be. I'd appreciate it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
if you're good with that, Derek, that's I mean, it stunned a lot of people, and it hit pretty close to home for a lot of people too. Whether it's 6 degrees of separation or whether they didn't even know you, we all know somebody, and your story is actually quite amazing. So, yeah, if you don't mind sharing.
yeah, thanks. And thanks for the setup. It's cool to even think about some of those efforts that I've done in the past already because I'm in such a different position now. And even though I'm working back toward an Everest and I have this whole campaign going right now, ICU to Everest, it's
Yeah.
just going to take longer than I expected. I mean, I thought I'd be doing it at the end of this month. And just kind of came to terms with the idea that it's probably not going to be good to force this type of thing.
Mhm.
And so I'm getting more comfortable with that. And I know this is going to be a long road, but I really do appreciate what you said. And it's great to know that the content I've been putting out through Dialed Health has had a lot of impact on the community, especially the local community. I think I say this all the time to my closer buddies, but part of me wishes I was more involved in the local community, but because of the business and the fact that an online coaching platform can reach the entire world, I have to really focus on making sure I'm reaching that. And sometimes it takes away from the in-person stuff, which is even why I prioritize things like the Thank Ride, which is that Thanksgiving morning ride and whatnot. So, anyways, thank you for
Yeah.
all of that. And I'm gonna give you guys the rundown. If I talk about it in a way that seems like I'm not super affected by it, it's just because I've done a lot of therapy. I've done some trauma therapy called EMDR, and I've done multiple rounds of it to make sure that I can talk about this in a way that doesn't send me off of some spiral cliff, you know?
Mhm.
And I will say, if anybody wants to hear the real version where I was deep in a dark place 6 weeks after it, I recorded a podcast episode with Ted King on his King of the Ride podcast. And I was grateful that he led me through it. I told him, I was like, I just want to timestamp this because my goal is to work through all of this trauma and put it behind me. But part of me wants to almost have something saved to remember actually how bad I felt and how scared I was. In fact, the day I recorded it was the day after I came back from the ER with an infection in my surgical wound, that I woke up and was basically exploded all over my bed and me. And it was so disgusting, man. I couldn't even talk about it
Wow.
online really because I was like, they're going to pull my account because this is the most graphic thing I've ever seen. And I just had this like hole in my surgical scar that canaled all sorts of different ways. So wound vacs and all this, but that's getting ahead. Anyways, I'm just saying if you want a really scary view of it, that would be the podcast to go and check out. This will be a little bit more matter of fact. So January, I keep forgetting if it was the 30th or the 31st, but I was out on a really normal training ride, zone 2, 2 hours, beautiful day in January, going out to the wine and the farm roads that we have locally just outside of Sacramento. And truth, like the most ironic thing about it is that I went to the roads that we ride to avoid cars. That's the truth.
Yeah.
And they're flat and there's less stop signs and less interruptions and they're not as fun, but when you want to get out and just hold a steady pace, they're perfect for that. So was up on these farm roads riding. I didn't have my cell phone on that ride, which was very significant for something later in the story, but probably the only time I've not had a phone on a bike ride in 5 years because I'm always capturing content. Obviously, I want it for safety, but for whatever reason that day, I left without it. I was kind of in a rush. I had actually just filmed or recorded a podcast episode for my show. And so I go out on this ride, realize I don't have my phone right about the turnaround point. I'm like, okay, no big deal. I got to just ride home anyways. And I went up to a four-way stop sign and started kind of clearing the intersection. Visually, I saw a car coming from the left. And of course, I'm rolling toward a stop. So my thought is, okay, this car is going to be slowing down. And so I look straight, it's clear. I look to the right, it's clear. At this point, I had checked up my speed, but I didn't come to a complete stop. And this is something, I mean, through I was at the court doing the whole case and sentencing and this whole process. And I've been honest from the beginning about it, but I didn't stop 100% either. You know, I'm a bike rider. I know bike riders, and I know that no one stops at stop signs 100%. It's like, especially when you're out on farm roads, and there's times when it's blind. Yeah, I'm not going to roll an intersection with cars that have a red stoplight, and it's kind of at your discretion. And there's even laws in some states like Colorado where you can roll stop signs on a bike and whatnot. So there's a reason for it. And I'm not going to sit here and say that I just stopped and put a foot down and counted to 3 before I got moving. I checked up probably to 10 miles an hour. I was going to make a left-hand turn. And as I had cleared the road in front of me and to the right, by the time I looked back to my left and had entered the intersection, what I expected to see was a car coming to a stop. And what I saw instead was a car speeding towards me at an insane rate. And I knew within a split second I'd be getting hit. And so.
And that person did have a stop sign?
Yes.
Okay.
It was a four-way stop.
Right. Okay.
And I just realized, yeah, I was going to be hit. And the last thing I did was just jump as high as I could. It was a really weird reaction. It almost felt like I was a cat. You know, I pushed off my handlebars. I pushed off my pedals as hard as I could. Of course, I'm clipped in. I just jumped as high as I could. And then I got hit by the car on my left side and I just cartwheeled in the air. And wow. The only thing I don't remember was actually landing back on the ground. It's pretty crazy because I had broke my helmet in 2 places. And I think there was a brief blackout, but part of me thinks I blacked out just from the G forces of getting spun so fast in the air. And I can't confirm that, but that's just what I think. I think one of the best things about this accident is that, for one, I didn't have spine damage and I didn't have any brain damage. And even though I felt and remember everything, which has brought a lot of trauma mentally, there's not this damage to my body that can't be repaired for the most part. You know, it's been 6 months since this happened, and there's still a lot I'm working through. I still have part of my scar that hasn't closed all the way because there's bone fragments in my skin, and it's causing all sorts of stuff. But it's getting close, and I'm kind of skipping ahead, so I'll jump back. I'll basically just say that I landed on the ground. I remember opening my eyes and rolling to my side. Rolling to my back and seeing a large truck driving toward me. And so I tried to get out of the street. And as I rolled to my left, it's like I knew I couldn't walk. But when I rolled my left and started crawling, my femur break was so bad that I felt my femur almost like roll around itself. And I saw my leg just do something you should never see a leg do. And the pain was so excruciating that I just realized I couldn't even crawl. And so then I laid on my back and just started waving my hands in the air in hopes that the car would stop. And thank God they did. Once I saw the truck come to a stop, I just laid my head back down on the ground, and I'm going to speed this up because I'm getting a little bit too into it. But that's when I realized I had a pelvis fracture as well as an open pelvis fracture, because I could feel the pain in my side, and I put my hand down on my hip and I just felt the bone pressing into my palm.
Oh,
And I looked at my hand and it was just covered in blood. And this is where the story feels like a miracle, because as bad as this thing was that happened, the people that arrived on the scene to save me is pretty miraculous. So at that point, I'm on these roads. So if you guys are familiar with the intersection, it's Wise and Crosby Harold. And so up in the Lincoln, it's kind of getting from the wine or the farm roads to the wine country. And long story short, I mean, it's very common for these intersections to go 5 minutes without a car passing through, maybe even more. And I had a car there within 30 seconds. I had a person who witnessed the actual wreck from the side the driver was coming from, I believe. I actually didn't see them the whole time, but I had a car there. And then the next person on scene was an off-duty registered nurse. And even though the
holy shit.
first couple, even though the
Yeah.
first couple came up and supported me, they actually asked for my phone to call somebody. And that's when I realized I didn't have my phone. And I was coherent enough to tell her my wife's name and number. And this is what's so significant about leaving my phone behind, is that it's like it it's like God knew that she needed some piece of hope. And for her, knowing that I was able to give my number to somebody else
Right.
was hope that I was at least mentally okay. And that is what she told me got her through on her way to the ICU.
Oh
And
God. I don't know
so
if I'm going to throw up from your description of the crash or cry because of what you just said. I don't know what to do here. So
Yeah,
yeah, I'm sorry. It's a lot. It's a heavy story.
and
no, no, no.
I feel really bad because that was pretty insensitive of me just to come right in at you with the about the crash, and
Oh, I think it
yeah,
sets
man.
up the rest of the conversation. So dude,
Okay.
I totally
All right.
understand. I didn't tell
You
you
know
to
what?
avoid it.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
you
And
know,
I can just get through the next part. Yeah, I can.
don't. It's interesting. You mentioned God or a higher being or whatever, and I don't want to detract from this, but I had two incidents recently. Mike, where'd you go, Mike?
Oh, I'm here.
Um,
Sorry, I had my
oh,
head down. Yeah.
no, I had on a group ride that or I organize. I had a guy, um, I had a guy have a heart attack, and everyone in the group couldn't get cell service in this location. A black SUV pulled up, and in that car was a registered nurse who had cell service. So 8 people didn't
Amazing.
have cell service, no medical training. SUV pulls up. Another friend recently was clipped by a turkey of all things,
Hmm.
goes down, fractures her neck. The first person on the scene, an orthopedic surgeon.
Wow.
It, I mean, so when you said that, those memories just came flashing back to me. So, anyways, I take away this is about you. So go ahead. So,
Is it is
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
is it do you think that it's had that person not shown up on the scene, do you think that your outcome would be dramatically different?
I do. And I haven't had this confirmed because there's just things you know, it's like, do I want to dig into this? But
Hmm.
my biggest concern once I realized that I had bones sticking out of me and a lot of blood, was that I'd die from blood loss. That was like my biggest
oh,
concern, especially because I was going into shock and just the way I felt. Um,
Wow.
and so when that registered nurse showed up, at this point, I'm getting help and the calls are being sent out, but nobody stopped the bleeding. And she walked up and I saw her take her sweatshirt off and cram it into a ball in her fist. And she just came up to me and just shoved it in my side first
Wow.
thing.
Oh, wow. Wow.
And I posted a picture from the scene.
I saw it. Yeah.
And if you look at the ground, you can see the trail of blood.
Hmm.
And it's very red and wide and deep. So
Yeah.
I do think there would have been a different outcome. And she gave me like more confidence that I would survive at least until the ambulance got there. And really from there, it was an ambulance ride that was about 12, 13 minutes before the ambulance showed up, which I thought was pretty dang good considering where I was.
Yeah.
It was another 25 minutes, a little bit more until I got to Sutter Hospital, the ICU.
So
And
you're still conscious through this whole thing? Like I mean, you've got these timelines pretty good. So you're
yeah,
there,
yeah,
right? Yeah. Oh man. Okay.
yeah. I was pretty much just in the ambulance begging him for painkillers the whole time
Hmm.
and staring at the ceiling. And, this is the last probably real sad thing I'll say before we sort of move on. But, in that moment, I even had Ted King ask me, he's like, were you afraid you'd never ride your bike again? And I'm going to be real with you guys. I didn't think about something like that for 1 second. I could only think about my boys and my family and, you know,
Yeah.
just the thought of my boys growing up without a father
Right.
was the thing. I have 3 boys under 5 years old. And so that was the only thing that mattered. And I was very lucky because after 2 days of surgeries and essentially 3 days of being, I wasn't unconscious, but I was so drugged up. I don't remember. I remember going into the ICU and talking to the surgeon for a split second. And then I woke up 2 days later with a tube in my throat. And even
Wow.
while I was still on a feeding tube, the doctor came in right when I woke up and he's like, I know this sounds crazy, but you're going to be okay. He's like,
Wow.
what you had horrible breaks. So I basically broke my fibula, broke my femur very badly, lots of bone fragments. It was like exploded. And then I had an open pelvis fracture that was completely shattered and just a mess. And I had a torn colon and a collapsed lung. And funny enough, like these are all scary, but the colon is almost the scariest one because if that doesn't heal correctly, like you could have a colostomy bag for the rest of your life. So I was very
Yeah.
grateful that wasn't all the way through. But what it meant was just a lot of surgeries and a lot of scars and a lot of potential for infection, which I realize is just so scary from surgery now. But yeah, I woke up a couple days later or I came to, and then the surgeon told me that, and he's like, your breaks were so bad, but he's like, none of the joints were affected besides the fact that we pounded a titanium rod through your kneecap, essentially, or through your knee, not your kneecap. They get that thing out of the way, um, but yeah, he's like, you're gonna heal and you're gonna be okay. And I'll tell you, I have held on to that so many times because
That one line. That one
that
line.
just him looking at me and being like, you're gonna be okay. Crazy.
Yeah.
Um, and it's true. I mean, it's been 6 months and I've already done a 100-mile gravel race, getting back to my normal schedule. I mean, really, my life right now looks very, very much like it was before this happened. And that's what I'm really stoked about. And it's really crazy. I was at church this weekend and I heard that this quote from my pastor. He said, "Mountaintop experiences are really important, and they're catalytic for your own uh, like motivation. They inspire you, but they can't sustain you day to day." And I was like, "Gosh, that is so true," because I have gotten focused on those mountaintop experiences where I'm like, I need to Everest again. I need to go do this trip or this race or this or that. But in reality, the thing I'm craving most is a consistent, healthy day-to-day lifestyle that had gotten taken from me for a long time. And so I'm so stoked to be getting back to that. And it has been a really, really challenging road. I mean, there's been stuff along the way that I never thought I'd have to deal with. I've been exposed to stuff I never even knew existed. But I do feel like I'm getting to a point now where I'm learning lessons from the experience. And even earlier today, I was thinking about how dark of places I have been mentally, but I can't look back at this whole 6 months and even say it was just a dark time because there has been so much love. Like you opened up and talked about the support from the cycling community. Dude, the way people have come out and support it's been overwhelming, actually. Uh,
I bet.
you
Yeah.
know, it has been in overwhelming in the best possible way, but from people praying for me to people just sending me kind messages of support to meal deliveries. We didn't cook a dinner for a month after this thing. Yeah, which is great because, like I said, I have 3 boys under 5, so my wife is taking care of them and me now.
Right.
And so then they came together and did a fundraiser and raised a ton of money for me, so I don't have to sweat my medical bills. And I think the biggest thing that was up in the air at that point was what my work would do. And to be honest, everyone's been supportive there. People who have subscriptions to my platform have held subscriptions. I mean, a lot of them do, anyways. But like there
Mhm.
are people that have said, "Hey, I'm getting a subscription to help support you," and that has been really noticeable. And what's interesting is like the work stress is just now starting to come back because the truth is like I usually update my product constantly, and I'm the person in all my videos and content. And so to not be able to do that the same way for so long, I think is starting to show. But there's been so much support; it's just crazy. It's so cool.
Well, Derek, I think that points out a couple of things. Number one, that there are good people. It's great that there are good people in the world, right? I mean, we
Yeah.
still deep down there are good people, and especially, well, in particular for us in our world, the cycling community that comes above. But I think it's a testament to
Mm-hmm.
you and what you had built because I didn't know of you until Mike introduced us, and I heard about you through Mike, and then you were on the podcast. When this happened, and you posted that, and then this word spread that there's fundraising going on. People that I knew from around this area that I had no idea, but they'd all heard of you, right?
Mm.
So you have obviously touched a lot of people out there. So I mean, it's a testament to what you've built, but also a testament, I think, to the cycling community as a whole. Just that we are, despite what motorists may think, we're actually good people, right? So,
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks.
yeah.
Thanks for that.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
no doubt. So, all right. So that's that. I mean, obviously that was all pretty heavy stuff. When did they end up catching the person? Like you mentioned, you were in court. You had to kind of relive it all again in court. How did all that shake out? Are you able to discuss that?
Yeah, I can discuss it. I don't know if I can go into details on certain terms of sentencing or whatnot, but yeah, I was really grateful that they caught the driver. Um, After he had hit me, he stopped and got out and looked at me and then got back in and left. And
Okay.
that was gnarly. And because it's essentially someone leaving you there to die.
Hmm.
And I think that took a little bit to work through, but they were able to catch the driver. Uh, how they did it, I can't quite say, but I'll say that they took this very personally. I have a lot of family in law enforcement that, and that was the investigators were aware of that. They took
Hmm.
very good care of me, and they went to insane lengths to catch the driver, and they did. And I think what's sad is that the driver's young. He's 18 years old,
Yeah.
and I'll be honest, when I heard that, it really was hard for me because I think you almost want this person to be a villain
Hmm.
and to be this persona that needs to go to jail for the rest of their life. But that truthfully just wasn't the case. I think that it's a young kid who wasn't being smart or not paying attention. I don't know why it happened the way that it did, but all I have to say is that we were able to go to court, and I got to look at him and tell him I forgive him. He asked for forgiveness from my family. It, got to look at each other in the eye. It all seemed very genuine. And, he'll be in jail for a little while. And I, I'll be honest with you, there at that point, there's just no vengeance in me because
Right.
there was so much closure. So I wasn't up there just being like, this person needs to rot in jail. I didn't feel that way at all. I really didn't. Um, and so I was just really grateful for the closure. I mean, there's so many little bits of closure that I've gotten to experience that a lot of people don't. I mean, I just got to throw my bike in the dumpster after getting it back from
Yeah.
the CHP, which I wasn't sure if I do or not, but it's like a growth moment where I'm like, I don't want to look at this thing anymore. It's
Mhm.
okay. It happened. I did take the parts off it that I could salvage, but most of it I wasn't able to. And so little things like that, they're empowering. And so yeah, I'm really grateful for that uh experience throughout the whole process, because not everyone gets to be able to do that. And as hard as it is to be there in court and to face it like that, a lot of people had recommended that I do it if I get the opportunity, and I'm happy that I did.
Yeah, well,
I,
the way you described
oof,
it, I mean, just gave me chicken skin, you know. I mean, it's like
Yeah.
yeah,
to be able to look each other in the eye and get that.
but it's interesting. I'm reaching deep. I'm sorry to cut you off, Mike, but I'm reaching deep down inside me, and I'm saying, uh, and I'd like to say that I took it, and it's I can't tell you how. I don't know what the admirable is not the right word. That you actually did not seek vengeance, right?
Mm.
That you just it was, but in my simple brain, I'm thinking, okay, that accident happens. The guy stops, and he's there, and stays. That's one scenario. He looks at you and drives away. That's another scenario.
Yeah.
And I don't know. It's curious. I'm curious as to where my level of forgiveness. If he was the guy that held my head, or put a bandage on me, or said, "My God, I'm sorry," whatever. But to then drive away, I can only hope that I would have taken the road that you take. Since I think the world needs more of that, but I could only hope that I would. So,
Yeah.
I don't know, bless you.
Yeah.
So,
It's a lot of grace. A lot of grace. Yeah.
Thanks. I mean, it's I think when you think about the reality of what happened, it was estimated that he was doing 60 miles an hour.
Wow.
And thankfully, it was a small car and I jumped. But I think the reason I cartwheeled as fast as I did is because I did get hit that fast. And because of even my own perception of, okay, there's a car coming, it'll slow down. I check straight, right? And then I'm getting hit. He was driving fast.
Yeah.
Um, and if you were driving that fast, which is stupid and not okay, but
Mhm.
if you did that and you're flying through an intersection, you're almost playing Russian roulette to an extent. But I can't imagine that someone would be hoping to hit a cyclist. Like to do
Yeah.
that
right.
with the intent of being like, I'm speeding through this and I hope I hit somebody.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a person out there like that, but that was the thing
No,
that
no, no.
I did think eased it up for me in a sense.
Hmm. I th
And my faith does have a lot to do with this as well. It's like you you want to show people the grace that God has showed you, and you know it's not my area to judge in a sense is how I believe. But I think the combination of those things is what made it easier to not feel as vengeful, because I'm like, dude, 60 miles an hour country road, you can't really see what's happening until it's happening. So
Yeah. Well,
I,
in fairness to the guy who hit you, we were all 18 once, and we have all done some really stupid things.
yeah.
And in our case, it worked out. We did something super stupid, but it never involved potentially killing somebody. And if you put yourself at 18 years old, having just done something really stupid, run a four-way stop, doing speeding, and you just hit somebody, the fact that he stopped, got out, looked at you, what's going on in his mind, right? He's freaking out,
Freaking out.
and
Yeah.
doesn't have a lot of experience to pull on. He's been driving a car for 2 years, if that. And, and it doesn't condone it at all. But as someone who's lived a little, I mean, you can see, you can kind of understand how somebody would just panic and freak out, and it doesn't define like the rest of his life.
Yeah, I agree. And honestly, I'm really grateful that he's going to have a lot of life to live after this whole thing and
Yeah,
can potentially turn it around. And I made that clear even too in the sentencing statement. So yeah, I think in that sense, there's a lot of hope. So
yeah, yeah.
that's cool.
And
Yeah.
let's, if you don't mind, if we could circle back to the woman who took her sweatshirt off and stuffed it in your bleeding body.
Yeah.
Did you ever reconnect with her?
No, she's like the only person that we didn't.
Dang.
I know. I I wasn't even sure if she was real for a while. Or not real, but I was like, this is an angel. And
Yeah.
Not all.
I think it still might have been, but I believe somebody got her name. I but there was like a strangely small amount of involvement on her part because everybody else stayed very involved. And
Yeah.
so I don't know why that is, but I have not connected with her.
Wow.
Yeah, but I
Not
have
all,
connected with other people that help.
not all superheroes wear capes, right?
Yeah, 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 100%.
Yeah. Wow, man. Okay. Well,
So
all super
here,
heavy. Oh, go
Yeah,
ahead, Keith.
yeah,
here,
we can switch gears to make it a little bit more
Right?
upbeat.
I
I'd
want
be
to talk
happy
well,
to.
I
about
do,
story.
um, what got me thinking, and one of the reasons I wanted to have you on is to switch gears. I hope this is the direction. So I recently had well, it was a while ago, but there's a group ride that I do on Saturdays. Um, and that I wasn't there that day, but going down a road, and they were making I'm trying to make this visual. They were making a left-hand turn. Okay.
Mhm.
So this car comes from behind them, right? And the natural thing for most drivers would have been to, okay, they're making the left, I'll drift over to the right into the shoulder and go around them as they make their left.
Mm-hmm.
This car decided to go around them this way. So essentially, she turned into them. Okay. And a
Wow.
very good friend of mine, same thing. A couple people went down, but one guy in particular vaulted, was thrown into the air. There's video of it, thrown into the air. I don't know the details. Seriously hurt. Long drawn out court case, the whole bit. Um, this guy has come back. How he does it physically, mentally, how he did it. He's come back. He's on the podium like every race that he does now. So somehow he's
Nice.
thrown it, and that got
Nice.
me thinking. Like I could have him on, or I could have you on. It doesn't matter. I'm curious. How do you find it inside you to get not only get back on the bike, but then to go and accomplish like this guy's accomplishing? He's racing. He's faster. Like I don't even like. I'm not like I've never seen him and I've been riding with him for years. How do you deep down inside? Okay, number one, just get back on the bike, but number two, now you set your goal to go in Everest, and it's only been 6 months, and so there is so much inspiration here and so much amazement that you're doing what you're doing. As I've watched you progress, even as quickly as you are back on the bike on a trainer, I'm like, how the fuck is this guy? Excuse me for the language, but
Yeah.
how is this guy doing this? How is he doing it?
Yeah.
So, and that's kind of where I
Yeah.
wanted to go, and that's why I was so excited that you agreed to come on, because I think that that's something that we're all going to face. That, right? It may just be simple, I broke my collarbone,
Mm-hmm.
right? But you have that apprehension of getting back on the bike. You have that apprehension of getting back in traffic. You have that hope that that despair that you've worked so hard to get to a certain level, and will you ever get back to that level? And I
Yeah.
think you're living proof that you can.
Yeah, thanks. I think I know I have a long way to go before I'm really back at the level I was at. The fact that I can go and do a 4 hour ride now and sit in zone two a little bit more consistently and not really be in pain is feels like a huge accomplishment. I think that I've overreached on some goals and had to reel it back in, like even scheduling this Everest and then, realizing it really is too much.
Yeah.
And I've had to learn the hard way on some of those, but what I would imagine, just speaking for the guy you're referring to, is that in the process of recovery, you really realize how much of a gift it is to be able to work out. And
Hmm.
whether that's ride your bike or do some push ups or do some walking lunges or go for a jog, your ability to choose to go and train and to be able to do it really is a gift. I actually had gotten sick this last week. I'm still dealing with a little bit of something, and it's been enough to not let me train again. And it's so frustrating because I have I've wanted it back almost more than anything. It's just my physical capability to go and do this. And so I've had to realize I'm like, I almost can't expect it, but when I can do it, it just feels like such a gift. And I'm also coming back from I think what feels like a wiser lens and taking things a little bit slower, listening to my body more. And who knows? Who knows what the hole in that guy's training you're talking about was, but maybe for him it was just building a base and just chilling out a little bit on rides and building up his capacity, and then he could raise the ceiling from there. And maybe that's what he did. Or maybe he was just so grateful for his workouts he was more consistent because less things got in the way mentally, or the way he prioritized it was a little bit higher. And it feels like that's how it's going to be for me. I just think the reality is that it's going to take some time, because even up until very recently, I was still kind of losing muscle in my leg because I have only recently been able to do things like body weight lunges or lunges with a little bit of weight, something that would actually build a little bit of muscle in your leg. Because we all know that, cycling does build some muscle, but not a ton for most people. So there's still been things going backwards, but I do think that the new appreciation for training, even though I loved it before and I was wildly consistent before, I've totally coined the term "I don't miss" for a reason. It's like I don't miss, and that going forward, it feels like it's on a whole new level. But at the same time, I have had to come to terms with my identity as an athlete of just not relying on that for value at this point, because that pressure is the thing that has killed the joy of riding and being back on the bike or workouts or any progress that I'm experiencing. And that's what happened when I seriously started training for this Everest the last month was, okay, 4 hour rides on the calendar, 3 felt good, 4 feels like a stretch. If I wasn't on the calendar, I probably would have just done 3. And then by the 4th hour, I'm thinking, wow, this is hard. It's going to be so much harder when I Everest because it's going to take 3 times as long. So I'm probably not ready. Where the reality is I'm out here doing a 4 hour ride 6 months after
Yeah.
life threatening injuries and having a
Yeah.
feeding tube down my throat. And so the fact that I'm even out here doing this right now is a huge victory. And it's like I have not even been enjoying those little steps as much because I've had the pressure of some performance. So I am totally taking that off my plate moving forward. I still
Good.
plan on doing some events, some fondos, things for fun, but any expectation of performance is something I'm going to let go of, and I'm gonna let that slowly come back when I'm ready. And I think I'll know when. Like I don't need help pushing myself. I need help backing off a little bit.
Uh-huh.
And so I think this is an area where I'm being intentional so I can back off.
Hmm.
I think that I think we just got our soundbite. I think that what you just said there is so important, and it's a lesson I'm learning. And if I'm hearing you right, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're not, instead of looking at it as like, wow, that fourth hour was hard, you're like, I did 4 hours. Like that's huge, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of an important message for all of us. We tend to go, okay, there's this 12-minute segment on this ride that I do, and you know, and on a good day, I'm there, right? And on a bad day, I'm not. But like, instead of going, wow, I was almost there, I go, instead of going, look how far I made it, I'll go, oh shit, I didn't make it, right? And it
Mm,
should be, you know, and I think
yeah.
that's what I'm hearing, right? Like 6 months after this thing happened, I'm out here riding 4 hours
Yeah.
Well,
instead of beating yourself up for feeling crappy in the last hour.
and
That,
and
Exactly.
and Derek, you should
yeah.
know that Dave is someone who beats himself up all the time. His inner
Mm.
Yeah.
dialogue is terrible, and I don't even know why it is, but it is.
Yeah.
And but yeah, so
But no,
hopefully you can learn from this, Dave.
I'm learning. And
Okay.
that's why I was so thrilled to hear that. I'm like, this is the way we have to approach it, right?
Yeah.
We're not going to
But
be great every day.
what's
Yeah.
challenging though too, and I think this is where you have to know yourself. There are people that need a kick in the butt. Straight up.
Yes.
There are
Yes.
some people that are way too easy on themselves and don't progress for like the opposite reason. And
Yeah.
so I think it's just good to know who you are and try and go about it accordingly, because not everybody needs to ease up. that's
Yeah,
that's one
that's
thing as a
right.
trainer I've learned, and it's just good to know that about yourself,
Mhm.
and which type of person you are and which areas you need a nudge in, because yeah, there are some people listening that really don't need to back off and they really need to step it up. And there's a
Well,
lot of people like us that are probably just thinking, oh, and this is not me saying like one's better than another. I know it kind of sounds like I'm coming off that way, but it's just the reality, you
yeah.
know.
Mhm.
Well,
And by
and
the way, I need to grab my charger real quick. Can you
oh,
guys
you
hold
do
for
it.
1 second?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
one
No
sec.
worries. Yeah. Yeah. So, what do you think, Dave? You think you can learn from Derek's example, or you think you're still gonna, if
Yeah.
you slip a pedal,
I'm
climb it up?
trying. I'm trying. I'm trying. I'm trying.
Yeah.
And I've had this conversation with my friends. I mean, it happened recently. Like, you know, instead of saying, wow, I've had my best time, it happened recently. I literally said, instead of having my best time in 2 years, I said, if only I had this, it would have been better. If only
Uh-huh.
I had done this, you know? And I'm like, no, give
Yeah.
yourself credit for your best time in 2 years, you
Yeah,
know?
there you go. There you
But
go.
I grapple with it. And that's what I'm hearing him say. And then,
So
you
there's
know, there's
hope.
some definitely tie-ins to, I guess I thought you had turned me on to this book, but these tie-ins to this atomic habits thing.
Hmm.
You got to download this. Well, you're a little more type A than me, but you got to download this book. This is like on par with, you know, how bad do you want it? This
Okay. Yeah, I'll check it
atomic
out.
habits thing,
All right.
you
So
know.
Derek, I'm glad that you brought this up because when
Oh,
you were
he's back.
talking
Sorry.
when you were talking about these two different personalities, right? In a sense, right? There's a person that puts too much on their plate, and then there's the chronic procrastinator that needs a kick in the butt to get going, right?
Hmm.
And so it is good to see someone that is the one who puts too much on their plate have that ability, recognize it, and then take that ability to step back and say, you know what, I'm putting too much here. I need to recalibrate, uh, get get myself physically, mentally ready, and then proceed from that place, as opposed to, setting something on the calendar and then just pushing yourself to do it. Because I know there's definitely a lot of people like that in the cycling world. I do have a question though, as it relates to your training and getting back on the bike and riding out in the wild again, right? So
Hmm.
you talk about the physical pain of, dealing with that fourth hour, but what about every time a car whizzes by? I mean, are you dealing with any of that at all? And how are you managing it?
Not as much as you would think.
Good.
Most of the trauma has been very unpredictable moments in my day-to-day life.
Oh,
And I think that gets back to the idea I mentioned earlier of like mountaintop experiences can't sustain you.
mm-hmm.
It's the little things. I knew I had real PTSD when my kids were watching a movie, a Disney movie of these two dinosaurs and the father dies. And I felt actually pretty dang good. One thing, spending time with my boys is just a whole another level of enjoyment that it's never been before.
Mhm.
And so I sit down on the couch. I got a big bowl of cereal. I'm like excited to just be comfortable with my boys for a little bit. And I look up and I see the father dinosaur, who was actually a ghost speaking to his son, get blown away by the wind, and the son is calling to him like, "Don't go."
Huh.
Dude, I spit my cereal out and I started hyperventilating, and my
Wow.
wife had to come and like grab me. And so those are the moments, or the trauma around the wound has been a big thing, but it's moments like that that really do affect me. Or, for a while, like I could just anything around death was actually very difficult. Like I couldn't listen to some of my favorite songs,
Oh, wow.
especially in like lighthearted stuff that you would never even think of death. But there'd be like a Blink 182 song, which is like really upbeat music, and it just said something about dying, and dude, I would lose it. And so yeah, very, very weird things. Even the laundry, not seeing riding kits in my laundry for a while would set me off. This stuff like that. So you can't really predict where it's going to hit you, but I almost have had more problems driving than riding.
Oh, wow.
And like going through intersections, seeing ambulances was a big trigger for a while. I've gotten through that. And now on my bike, the only place I don't feel very comfortable are actually country roads that are really quiet. It's kind of
Huh.
strange. I still haven't, I've been out to the corner I got hit on. I drove out there, but I have not ridden out there. And I will, but I'm waiting to go with somebody just in case something comes up. And I'm not rushing it. That's like one of the last closure things I honestly haven't done.
Yeah.
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 Like I want to go ride through the intersection and take the turn like I meant to that day.
Yeah.
And I also want to get back to just riding those roads. I actually might be moving out pretty close to it, but
Really?
yeah, maybe. And so I love riding out there, and I want to get back to it. So that would be the biggest thing. And part of me thinks that maybe maybe it was just so unexpected in such an unexpected place that that's why it feels like a wild card right now. I've
Mm.
never felt that uncomfortable around cars, and I'll be honest, there's part of me that's sort of enjoyed riding through traffic, even still now. I mean, I am way more cautious now. In fact, my motto when I go out and ride the roads, it's not to be cautious. It's not even really just to focus on safety. My motto is to be patient. When
Mm.
I ride now, I am patient. I'm patient if I'm on the bike trail and there's people. I'm patient at stop signs, at stoplights. I'm just patient. I don't need to rush through it, period. I mean,
Yeah.
if I had a nickel for every dog I have bunny hopped on a bike trail because I wasn't slowing up to get
Mm.
through some people, you know,
Yeah.
I wouldn't
Yeah.
need my platform. So it's like it's funny to see the areas that I was also causing problems as a cyclist. And so riding patiently is really important, but I've always gotten a strange enjoyment out of riding through traffic. I think there's like a rush, like this adrenaline thing that can be really fun about it. I also used to commute in Santa Monica on a little single speed bike with narrow bars, and I just loved ripping through traffic. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so it's weird. And I also I've had a car accident before where I hit the side of a car. I was doing like 20 miles an hour, and I put like a football sized dent in the door and just bounced off. And to be honest though, what I walked away from that was that wasn't so bad. I'm pretty durable. Like I could do
Uh-huh.
that. And it was
Right.
a horrible way to look at it. And so it's almost sad it's taken such an extreme for me to just get back to a place where I'm more patient. But I did a post about it. And I think the biggest thing that I would really recommend for cyclists going forward is to just when you get out on the roads, there's no interval that's worth blowing a stop sign or doing something dangerous. There's no KOM. And this is someone who's I've chased a lot of KOMs and I've gotten a lot, and it's super fun. But the time that I actually got hit by a car prior was uh, on a turn when I was going for a KOM, funny enough. And so, and if I wasn't going for that, I probably would have checked up enough to see this car and vice versa. It's a very weird
Yeah.
scenario. Uh, and the car did something they weren't supposed to do, but it doesn't matter. So it's like the motto is just ride patiently. You know,
Hmm.
if you're that concerned about you have to get perspective. You know, don't get to the point that I've gotten to actually realize how important it is to be safe. Because even
Right.
in our area, we have Auburn Folsom, which is
Yeah.
probably one of the most trafficked roads in our area of Northern California. And I've done intervals on that where I'm so cracked, I'm like swerving in and out of the bike lane because I can barely see, let alone if there was any traffic or I don't know, a squirrel runs out in front of me. Like it's like you have
Yeah.
to ride within some degree of control.
Yep.
And yeah, so I don't know. I would never tell someone not to go out and ride their bike, but be patient. And then even better, if you can get radar and use that to your advantage and start waving at people and just be more cautious of the bike or the cars around you, that's even better.
Yeah.
Yeah. It speaks to the old adage that the cost of failure is just too high, right? So
Mm,
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
it is for
Yeah.
what we're doing. That's for
Some things
sure.
just aren't worth it. Some things just aren't worth it. So
Yeah.
Yeah, it is interesting, like that concept of patience. So, it's kind of
Yeah,
counterintuitive for a lot of us.
mhm.
When
it
you're
is.
on the bike, you're working so hard, and then, it's like the four-way stop is a great example.
Hmm.
Where a lot of times as cyclists, if we stop, it kind of screws up the whole rhythm of the intersection, right? Because the
Yeah.
cars are looking at each other, and then the person on the right has the right of way, and there's this whole thing that's happening that's automatic. And then here we come and we jack it up. And
Hmm.
so as a cyclist, I always try to accomplish two things. I want to not not mess with the flow of traffic, and also want to try to keep as much momentum as I possibly can.
Hmm.
Right. So running those four-way stops, maybe right alongside of a car that just took off with you,
Yeah.
is kind of
That
like the best
That's
case
a great
scenario.
example. Using another car for shelter that way, in a
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah.
And yeah, and that's stuff that I still do because, like you said, there's a point where you're gonna cause more of an issue by coming to a stop. I don't
I've
know,
had
when you have that
I've had people
opportunity. It's
flip
just
me off. I've had people flip me off because they were
yeah,
about to go, and then they thought I was going to run the stop, and then I stopped, and then they stopped, and then they look at me and like give me the finger, and it's
yeah.
just like, come on, man, you
And
know?
also what I've noticed too, because I've been way more obviously accountable. I'm going through all this stuff and I'm like, God forbid somebody sees me out here blowing
Oh,
stop signs left and right. You know
right,
what I mean? And
right,
I'm not even coming forward as some advocate for rider safety or anything like that. I mean, I'd
sure,
love to help cause things or stop things before they start for people. But okay, yeah, then you think of scenarios of a three-way stop where you have no intersection to your right. There's an intersection on the left. People can make a right turn from that cross street or a left turn, but either
yep,
way, there shouldn't be any cross traffic. It's like, are you going to come to a stop?
right,
And then you add the fact that there's actually no cars around at all, and you can see. And then even with certain stop signs, and it's like your field of vision. It, am I going to stop at every single one? I mean, probably not. Can I say yes or no? Is this incriminating? I have no idea, but it's just the
right,
reality. I'm not going to sit here and talk to bike riders and be like, you need to unclip and put your foot down. Because I posted about this crash and I had comments like that. People would
right,
say, I hope you learned your lesson for not coming to a complete stop. And
yep,
I'm like, there's no way you really ride as a sport and say that. There's just no way that you do. But on the flip side, again, it's like I get the goal of wanting to keep as much momentum through an intersection as possible, but I would almost challenge you to get that out of your head too. Which
mm-hmm,
it's almost just like, what's the safest way to get through this intersection? And sometimes, you roll up and a car is moving and you have shelter from the vehicle. I think that's pretty appropriate. And that's probably
mm-hmm,
the mindset even going forward. But dude, I've been on rides with people already where I'm the only one who slows up for something. And I'm like,
right,
either I'm gonna lose this group or they're gonna get mad or they're gonna start slowing up with me. I don't know.
right.
Um,
Yeah, it is
yeah,
always a little challenging, especially in the scenario, that intersection you're talking about, where it's a country four-way stop where there's almost no traffic ever.
yeah,
And, so yeah, there's all these little decisions you have to make as a cyclist. But I do feel like that, just like you described the three-way. where
Yeah.
you got that straight lane and there's no way anybody's ever going to hit you because it's a bike lane essentially. Um, but it's also a red light, you
Hmm.
know, and then, but that whole relationship of the cyclist and the driver
Yeah.
is where stuff like that, when you run something like that, sometimes people will bark at you, and say
Yes.
say something, and it's just like, then I think like, well, I'm right in this situation, but that's the impact it's having on people that drive cars. So maybe I'm wrong just because their reaction to it is, you know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
there definitely needs to be a better relationship between drivers of cars and cyclists,
And I'll
and
tell you that since I've been riding more patiently, my interactions with cars have been way better. Way
oh,
better. I
yeah,
still had someone get mad at me for taking up the lane in a downtown area where I was actually going the speed limit. It was on a hill. And so this guy was just obvious. He just wanted to be mad at something.
sure.
But I do agree with you. When you are showing more courtesy as a cyclist and not getting out there and demanding that everyone just yields to you, which is the law.
Mhm.
But I have had a way better experience with drivers and people on the bike path, just across the board. Yeah,
Yeah.
way better experience.
All right. Well, so let's talk about shifting gears a little bit and this putting the goal of the Everesting in Switzerland.
Yeah.
You know, and so you're still
Hey
planning to go?
guys,
Yeah.
can I take my, this is breaks my heart, but can I take my leave here? I'm getting the signal that more family has showed up and that I'm a shithead for not being there and all
All right.
that. So,
Yeah.
but I
Yes.
definitely want to, because it is such an amazing continuation of this story that you're actually doing this event or this incredible feat post this accident. Please, guys, keep talking, and I'll get back. And I want to hear the story myself. And I'm genuinely sorry that I have to jump, but I got to jump.
No,
So,
thanks, Dave. If I was you, I'd have a margarita in my hand with some toes in the sand as well. So enjoy that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
all right,
Yeah.
all right,
And the
guys.
episode will drop Thursday, Dave. So if you want to listen.
Yeah, maybe well, I'll be sound biting it before that. So,
Okay. All
cool.
right.
All
All
right,
right.
guys. Thank you, Derek. Thank you so much. Yeah, my continued healing thoughts are with you. So keep
Thank
it
you.
up.
Thanks, Dave.
All right.
Appreciate it.
All right. Bye.
All right. Where were we? Oh, we were talking
Uh,
Switzerland. So,
Switzerland. Yeah.
setting the goal, then coming to the realization like, hey, that's too ambitious. Are you still planning on going to the event? Or are you still planning on going to Switzerland at all? Or where are you at with that?
Yeah, we're still going. And this is
Yeah.
actually something I'm very proud of because I will tell you last year, if I'd planned something like this and gotten the injury, I probably would have just called it off immediately.
Mm,
And I'd be lying if I didn't say there's some level of stress going and not being a little bit more healed. Like I think the wound thing is the biggest one. I'm just still changing band-aids on my hip, which is frustrating and something you got to
mhm.
keep track of. But when you think about it, you're like, okay, that shouldn't stop you from some amazing travel experience. And when I was considering calling off the trip I think this was like 3 or 4 months in, we had booked it, talked about it. I was actually at a family party and my father-in-law had brought it up. And I was like, man, I really am not sure if I'm going to go anymore and all this and that. And he said, I think your wife would really appreciate it if you took her and still did a vacation. And
Yeah.
I was like, wow, I am ashamed to admit this, but I had not even really thought about that because I've always been so focused on anything writing related being an extension of work and what's the value and what's the gain and what's the ROI on this whole situation. And so I was like, you know what? You're probably right because the plan since the beginning has been to bring my wife and also to bring my videographer and his wife because thankfully the wives get along great and they can hang out while we're doing our writing thing for the first portion of the trip. And then after the event was done, my wife and I are going down to Lake Como in Italy and going to have a proper few
Oh,
day vacation.
yeah.
And so once I committed to not doing the ride, so I committed to that first, and I was like, this is a great idea. And also, this is just a new way of thinking. It's actually prioritizing my relationships more than just work.
Yeah.
And
What
so
a concept.
Crazy, right? And so that felt really good to be like, oh yeah, we could actually still go and just really enjoy this vacation. And getting past that selfish notion where, like, you know how it would be if you put yourself in the perfect place to ride and you couldn't really ride. That's like torture, you
Yeah.
know? And
Yeah.
so I got past that too, because I was like, even if I'm not really ready to ride out there, this is still a beautiful side of the world that I'd want to see. And I know my wife does. And whether or not I can ride is completely irrelevant to her. So get that thought out of my head. And
Yeah.
so I did. And then I got to the point where I'm like, okay, no, I'm going to recommit to this. I had done a gravel race. I felt confident that I could handle some training stress, but 100 miles with 4K, even on gravel, is nothing compared to a
Yeah.
150-mile Everest roam, which is what this would have been. And so I was like, okay, I'm not going to be ready for this. The training is too stressful. It's adding discomfort. And the last thing I need in my life right now is more discomfort, which is another realization. It's like,
Yeah.
I've spent so many years seeking it. And now I'm just actually trying to get some relief right now. And I think that's okay. So I was like, okay, well, I can't do this Everest Roam ride, but this is a Fondo that has multiple different distances. So I actually just registered for a shorter distance.
Hmm.
And now what I've been doing is looking at all the mountain passes in the area, which I was planning on doing beforehand. But I'm like, well, if I'm going to do a quote unquote shakeout ride, which now can be a normal ride, I don't have to come in as fresh for this. I'm going to go ride an epic mountain pass every day. So I think the
Oh
days
yeah.
leading up to it, we're going to go ride. I think it might be St. Bernard Pass in southern Switzerland.
Okay.
Do you know Safa Brian on YouTube?
I don't. Uh-uh.
Oh, Mike,
Oh,
this
I
is
got
going
to
to be a
check this guy
find for you.
out.
This
Yeah.
is one of my favorite content creators, period.
What's
Top
it?
three.
What's he called?
Safa Brian. So it's Safa, short for
Okay.
South African, and
Yep.
then Brian.
All right. I'm into it. I'll
Just
check
go
it
to
out.
his channel, and then you could even watch his Praise for Speed documentary, which was just 4 days riding in Switzerland. So he has all these mountain passes, and they're just these beautiful descents. And he's one of the gnarliest descending guys. He did that video with Tom Pidcock in Malibu. I don't know
Oh,
if you saw that going viral, but anyways, there's all these mountain passes that we can hit. And now it's cool because I don't have to be as fresh for the ride. The ride I'm doing is still like 70 miles and like 12K. And it just goes all around these beautiful passes in Switzerland. So it's honestly turning out to be even more of a dream trip than if I had the pressure of some bigger performance.
yeah.
So I'm really stoked because we're still going to film for the documentary. Just the deadline on it is going to be pushed back. Maybe we'll split it up into part one or part two or something. I'm not sure. But we're still going to enjoy the vacation, and it seems like a win-win. So it's going to be more building, more progress. But I think even more than that, kind of just doing a bucket list riding trip, especially after missing out on so much this year. So
Yeah.
it's getting exciting. We're leaving in like 2 weeks.
Well, I'll send you because we were there last summer and we did a couple we didn't spend much time in Switzerland, but we did Furka, of course, and then we did Gothard and Old Gothard. And Old Gothard,
I saw those are pretty close to each other actually, because
oh my
I was looking
gosh.
at both of those. Okay,
Yeah.
when you search Safa Brian, search Furka Pass, and you guys
Okay.
wrote it, but you'll see the way he wrote it was insane.
Okay, cool. Yeah, no, I would
That's
definitely
cool.
will.
You guys did that.
We did it in the same day. We did Furka and Old Gothard in the same day. And
Nice.
we didn't ride from Furka to Old Gothard. We basically loaded the car, drove to Old Gothard, and then did Old Gothard. But Old Gothard uh, was so amazing. It's all cobblestones, and it was like built in like I want to say it was like the 1600s or something. It's insane
Whoa.
when you think about the amount of man hours and just the vision of like how they decide. I mean, it's so whimsical. There's so many switchbacks, and it's insane. It really is insane. Not the hardest, most technical ride, and certainly not a great descent because it's really pretty rough on the descent, and there's hairpins all over the place. So
Right.
it's not great, but just from a sheer spectacle, yeah, I'd recommend trying to get if I mean, you're planning your trip, but I'll send you my ride and you can kind
Yeah.
of take a look at it and see. But
Oh, I'd
yeah,
love to see it. Those were the two because they were close to each other also that I thought I'd want to hit. I think they're about 2 hours from where we're staying though. And I was like, I don't know if this would be too much with the event the following day, but I'll see because I have my event on the Saturday, and then we go to Italy, and so we might even kind of cross through it. We'll see what it entails, but if I could choose, I think Furka Pass would be at the top of my list.
Yeah, it's spectacular.
Okay,
Yeah,
that's
you
awesome.
can't really go wrong. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, we did so many mountain passes in all of Italy's, France and Switzerland, and thinking back, each of them kind of have their own specialness to them, but yeah, they're just all, you're gonna love it, no matter what you end up over there. It's just so spectacular and beautiful.
Oh,
And
great.
yeah,
That's awesome.
yeah,
What was your? I think you had told me we chatted at
hmm
one point about your trip, but what was the best ride that you did? Like, what was the best day, route,
So
climb?
yeah, it was kind of surprising because we had planned on going to the Pyrenees. So we were going to go to Switzerland and then we were going to drive down to the Pyrenees, which is like I think it's 7 hours.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, but it was pouring rain. Uh, like we were looking at the weather while we were in Switzerland. It rained on us one time in Switzerland. It rained so hard, it was crazy. Like
Whoa.
you wouldn't dare go out in it, that
Right.
type of thing. Like, not on a bike, no way. But and then we were looking at the Pyrenees weather, and it was just rain, and it was rain forecasted for the next 5 days, and that's basically what we had planned. So we ended up recalibrating. We liked Italy so much because the Italians are amazing, fun people,
Hmm.
and the riding there was great. And so we did the Col de Nivelle was not it's not super famous. Like I
Mm-hmm.
don't think it's been in any big races or anything, but man, that was my favorite. So
Really?
yeah,
That's cool.
we parked at this there was like a little spot to park next across the street was someone's home, but it was also an Italian restaurant. And so that's where we started and we rode. And anyway, it was like a big day. I mean, I think I got like 14,000 feet that day, It's a big day. But it goes to a dead
Yeah.
end, goes up to a dead end. And it's not like it's 14,000 feet. I was riding with Bo, a buddy of mine from
Yeah.
we started the podcast together, and he was going a little slower than me. So I ended up getting to the top and then I circled back, grabbed him, and then we rode to the top together. And so I think maybe it's a 9,000 footer or something like that. But
Dude.
the
That is
scenery, oh, it's so spectacular.
yeah.
I'll send it to you. That was my favorite that stood out. And the ride was remarkable. Then we get back, we load our bikes and we walk across the street to the restaurant. And it was his husband and wife, and she's cooking grandma's recipes. And there was like 4 tables in the restaurant. It's like because it was their house. They just converted a room or something. And the husband's serving us, and he was hilarious. And we're getting like these big plates of pasta for $8. And
Whoa.
yeah, I don't, and it was venison. And I don't usually, like I don't usually, I mean, I'm pretty much white meat guy. I don't really do red meat anyway. But the venison came from the village that was right there. It was from his neighbor that,
Wow.
yeah, anyway. So everything was fresh and local, and the experience with those people was amazing. And so the day couldn't have been any better, right? The ride was epic. And then to finish with that as an experience, super cool.
Wow. That
Yeah.
gets me really excited. That
Yeah.
sounds like the ultimate day out on the bike. So
Oh,
that's
yeah.
good. Oh,
Yeah.
that gets me stoked.
Yeah. I might be able to get you the name of the restaurant. So maybe you can figure out where it is and just park there and just start heading up. It's awesome.
Yeah, you should let me know. I know that I did swear to my wife that once the Switzerland portion of the trip was over, I'd put the
Oh,
bike away.
yes.
Uh, maybe I will still have it with me. So maybe to get out. And
Uh-huh.
apparently there's this bike path near Lake Como, and I don't know which part I'm staying on versus where it's at. That's supposed to be incredible. Funny enough. But in my head, I was like, oh, well, if there's something easy to pop out on for like an hour or two, maybe I'll do that.
Right.
But we'll see. I will take it just in case.
Okay.
And
You don't have to
I
go all the
won't
way to
say
the
anything to my
top.
wife. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what are you talking about? Yes, I do.
Yes, you do, right? But the mountaintop cannot sustain you,
There
right?
you go. Touche. Touche.
I learned something from you on that one. Yeah. My wife's sitting right next to me. I don't know if she believes it. I believe that, but yeah.
Dude, that's
So
awesome.
yeah. Well, one of the other things I wanted to touch on, because because the accident and how, everybody was rallying around it. One of the things that was really beautiful was to watch the way that your wife was documenting it and the support that she was giving to the whole situation, right? And so, can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. I I see my wife as even more of a rock of the family than I did before. I mean, I knew she really held this place down because I'm so type A compared to her that I bring a lot of different energy into the house.
Hmm.
And she is so steady and so consistent and so relaxed. She is the most content person I've ever met in my life, period.
Wow.
And her ability to just handle what was thrown at her at that time, even emotionally, was insane. I think maybe 2 months after, there was a point where we both looked at each other and I looked at her and I said, okay, you're getting a little robotic and I think that you need to decompress somehow.
Hmm.
And she was able to go do that. She started doing some more date, or not date nights, but girls nights with her friends,
Hmm.
and just started doing some more fun things again because it had been a while since she just had some fun. And both of
Right.
us got to a point where we looked at each other, we're like, gosh, we just want to have some fun. And
Yeah.
even now, it's been such an emotional 6 months that I'm kind of ready to not be so emotional, like
Yeah.
good or bad, because it's been all over the place.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I just think that it, it's like the mountaintop saying. It's like, your wife, who you choose to do life with, is probably the most important decision. Maybe
For
one of
sure.
them, without a doubt, one of them, if not the most important decision you'll ever make.
Yeah.
And it's crazy because people change, but one thing I've realized is that, we're high school sweethearts, which is kind of corny to say, but we've been
Hmm.
together for like 17 years already, and we're in our early 30s. And so we've grown so much, but we've grown so much closer that whole time. And this even amplified it to another level. So it was just amazing because she took care of me. And even now, she has been a sounding board for me
Hmm.
because I'm very open and transparent on my platforms of the stuff I'm going through. There are things I don't talk about though. And most of the time, if I don't talk about something, it's because there's too much explanation. I also don't like complainers. And so I don't
Hmm.
want to get on and just complain about stuff. Uh, you
Yeah.
know, I'll show you. You see my hands right now?
Yeah. What's going on there?
It's a sickness that you don't even want to know about. And I'm not going to talk about it. But
Okay.
it's really bad. My hands are covered in blisters and I can't
Oh,
even, it's horrible. I feel horrible. But
wow.
it's there's stuff like that have been major issues that she has had to take the brunt of, because I kind of hit a limit even last week to where I'm like, why is all this stuff happening to me? Like, I've never had so many health issues. It feels like anything that happens to me right now is too much for me to handle. I had a
Hmm.
tattoo get infected for the first time in my life.
Oh, wow.
And even that was like, the why, you know, getting stung by a bee and then all of a sudden my chest swells up. And it's just like these little things. And I'm like, dude, this should be a non-issue. And in the past it has been, but right now it just feels like too much. So all these extra little things that have happened just in living have been a lot for me to handle. And so she's just taken the brunt of it. And I'm constantly telling her, like, almost apologize, like, I'm so sorry to put all this on you. Like, just, I don't know who else to talk about it with.
Yeah.
And she's just always like the sounding board. And she doesn't just tell me what I want to hear. She just says it like it is, and I can count on that. So there's a very long-winded way to say it. She's just an absolute rock of the family, and could not be more grateful for her and just the core unit of family as well. That's something
Yeah.
I'm very blessed with, and even just the core amount of people around you. Like, it's so easy to have a lot of relationships that don't mean a lot, but then to have people there for you when it really matters the most.
Yeah.
I literally couldn't use the restroom without somebody for weeks after this, and my parents took care of me at that time.
Yeah.
And so, anyways, it's just been a reminder of, even like Dave said, of just how loving people are across the board. We don't need reminders that there are bad people in the world, but
Yeah.
sometimes you do need a reminder that there's a lot of good in the world, and that there's more good people than you even realize. And this whole experience has been like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I can imagine it's like not just a reset physically, but mentally as well. Just you start to see things in a different light. Maybe things that maybe you would have taken for granted previously that
Hmm.
or weren't always at the surface level until something like this happens, and then everybody kind of rises up, and then you realize, how great you have it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
And
it's
just with what people are dealing with as well, spending that much time in the hospital and understanding how scary health complications are, and how you can get fixated on something in your brain and it just shuts down the rest of your life. And
mhm.
so that has been very eye-opening. And I've been wanting change to happen in a positive way. Like, I like who I was before this, but I know there's a lot of growth that I want to gain from this experience.
Mhm.
And I'm just doing my best to make sure that it's not a negative change, because that is one thing I've been introduced to, is a lot of negativity and dwelling on
Oh,
sad things and getting fixated on sad things. And to be honest, people, in their attempt to connect with me and try and support me, have unloaded a lot of weight on me as well.
oh. Mhm.
I had people sending me all of their horror stories for months, and it still happens. And I've gotten better. There have been people in person that have started being like, "Oh man, this time I compound fractured my elbow, blah blah blah," and they start saying it,
Yeah,
and I just stop them. And
right.
then they'll be like, "Oh, okay, okay," but really, and I'm like, "No, no, no," I'm like dead serious. So it's funny because it, people are trying to tell you that you're not going through something alone, but in the process of it, they can just put this thing in your head that was never even there. And
Right.
now you have this new fear, and you're so fragile that it's like it has more impact on you than you almost should. And so, yeah, I've just noticed that I want there to be a lot of growth. And I think that there has been, and there will be a lot more, especially once my pain reserves and my uh I think once the everything rebuilds up and replenishes, I'll be in a new place. But yeah, just making sure that it's in a healthy way, and the bad thoughts that I've had don't stick around and don't become a new habit.
Right. Yeah, I mean, just, you know, knowing you the little bit that I do, I mean, I can't imagine that would take hold with you. Just your perspective on life and everything. It's just it's always been so positive and pushing forward. It is kind
Thanks.
of interesting when you were talking about your wife, about her being the most content person,
Mm.
and content and type A are not necessarily together all the time, right? And so there's probably like a really good balance that
Hmm.
that you guys have together. But I know, like, I've been, listening to these Stoic books, on
Hmm.
Stoicism, and a lot of it is about trying to find contentment, and as like that's almost the ultimate goal, is to be
Hmm.
content. But I don't know that it matches. So it's a real struggle for me. Like I've definitely got some really great things from the Stoic philosophy and the
Hmm.
philosophers, but that's one where I really struggle with, is content, because as an athlete or someone who sees themselves as such, you don't want to get content with where you're at. You're always
Right.
striving to do more, or to be better, to, tweak this or tweak that. You're always looking for that edge. And that doesn't necessarily go hand in hand with being content. So, um, yeah,
Yeah. Same thing with business. And I think it
yes.
applies to a lot of areas in life. In fact, there's a bodybuilder I love to follow, and his slogan is "proud but never satisfied."
Ah,
And it does resonate. But then again, it's like, well, don't you want to be satisfied at some point?
yeah,
And it's
right.
it's like there's also a distinction between joy and happiness. It's like happiness is this very surface level feeling, that can come and go depending on your circumstances at any given time.
Yeah.
But joy is like a deeper feeling of almost happiness that can't be shaken as quickly. And so I think that kind of applies to what you're saying. It's like you can have your athletic pursuits and your business pursuits, but I do think there's a level where you should be able to take a breath and sit back and be like, okay, look at what I've done. I'm proud of this, and I can move on from here. But yeah, it would suck to not be able to even have that moment. You know what I mean? Like at the
Yeah.
end of a hard week or something,
Yeah.
and I'm actually getting a lot more refocused on work, especially because I am trying to take focus off of my own athletic goals right now.
Hmm.
And there's a feeling that you have at the end of a really good work week where I can just sit back and I don't know, maybe have a drink and just think, like, take that breath and be like, wow, this was good, this was bad, but I totally worked my tail off this week. And I love that
Yeah.
feeling, So yeah, I think that what you said about type A and contentment definitely don't line up. But hopefully you can scratch the surface on some of it. And I'm assuming some of the content you're taking is from Ryan Holiday. It's like the
Uh-huh.
obstacle is the way and ego is the enemy.
Yeah. And
Yeah, it's
and
really cool.
Marcus Aurelius meditations, you know.
I've never
The
read that one.
the thing that's interesting about that one is it was his own personal journal.
Oh,
So
wow.
it wasn't like he was writing a book. He was just journaling about his life and his struggles, and it wasn't for anybody but for himself.
Hmm.
And he was a Roman emperor, so he was in charge of everybody, and yet he still had these struggles with humility and grace and jealousy and all these things that we still struggle with today. And so it's really compelling when you some of the things, I'm kind of a knucklehead, so some of the things I get lost on a little bit, but
Oh, yeah.
there's definitely a lot there to unpack, and it's just really good stuff. And we think so much of like we've come so far and we're this modern society and we've evolved and we're this and that, but at the core, it's all those basic elements were still in play even in the most barbaric of times, so it's really interesting from a just human standpoint, a human perspective.
Yeah, that
So
that sounds super interesting. I'll have to
yeah.
check that one out.
Yeah, for sure.
Powerful.
All right, man. Well, listen, I feel like we could talk all afternoon, but and you've been very generous with your time, and appreciate it so much. And I apologize if I was a little insensitive when I jumped in right out of the gate with, "Tell me about your accident," like a big,
Oh, no,
yeah. But
thanks, man. I no offense taken. Super grateful to be able to share my story. And I think this type of opportunity is what gives a lot of purpose behind just going through the event itself. So hopefully
yeah,
someone's encouraged by it to some extent. And hopefully the next time we talk, it'll be maybe post Everest or just back at a place where I feel like I'm very close to all the way recovered. And it'll
yeah,
be exciting to talk about that process a little bit. But until then, I'm just going to keep plugging away on my normal schedule, slowly increase the rides, the variety on the workouts, and really just try and enjoy the process as much as I can and just see what growth kind of comes from it. I think that's really all there is to do. So yeah, already looking forward to the next one. If you have
yeah.
me back, but I,
Oh,
I want to thanks
definitely.
for the time, man. Appreciate it. Yeah.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, I think that's good way to end it. And definitely enjoying the process is something that everybody can take with them. So if somebody wanted to, that doesn't already, how would they follow along with you and your journey? And then you also offer personal training and coaching. Can you kind of tell us the best way to get involved with that?
Yeah, there's a few ways. So I'm the most active on my Instagram, which is just at Dialed Health, DIALED Health. And you could also use my training programs at dialedhealth.com or through the Dialed Health app. They actually sync together, but they're all strength training and mobility routines specifically for cyclists. And they're designed to integrate with your actual riding program because we are all cyclists after all. And
Hmm.
so that's still the priority. But it's just giving you what you need off of the bike to make sure that you have your best performance on the bike, essentially. And that we're the happiest, healthiest humans possible. Because I'll tell you,
Yeah.
just a side note, the strength you take into an injury is definitely what you're going to rely on to get through it. That is a whole other thing I've learned. So
Yeah.
don't wait. You got to start that now. I also have a podcast, the Dialed Health Podcast, and a YouTube channel, which has been on pause, but coming back very soon. So yeah, thanks for all the support. And if you guys want to use my programs or get in contact with me or just see the content, you can go to those places.
Perfect. All right. Well, thanks again, Derek. Really appreciate you coming on. And thanks to everybody out there listening. That's a wrap.